Most parents protect their kids, but mine, they poured illegal chemicals on my face just because I wasn't white enough. I stood there screaming while my skin literally melted off in the kitchen sink. All because my mother thought my natural skin was a curse. If you think this is a horror movie, you're wrong. This was my Thanksgiving dinner. I remember the smell first. It smelled like burning hair and old trash. My mom held my head down with her strong hands. My dad stood by the door to make sure I didn't run away. I was 22 years old, but in that moment I felt like a small, scared animal. "Stop crying, Leia," my mom hissed in my ear. "We are doing this for you. We are fixing the mess you made." The mess she meant was my skin. I am naturally brown. To me, it was just my body. To her, it was a mistake that needed to be erased. Growing up in our house was like living in a cold, white box. My mom hated the sun. She called it the thief because it stole our beauty. Every morning before school, my sister Elena and I had to stand in a line. Mom would rub thick, smelly white cream all over our faces and arms. It burned a little every day, but we were told that pain meant it was working. "If you are dark, nobody will love you," Mom would say. "If you are dark, you will be poor. You will be nothing." She made us wear long sleeves even when it was 100 degrees outside. If we got a tan, we didn't get dinner. We spent our childhood in the dark, hiding from the light like ghosts. I used to look at the other girls at school. They played outside. They laughed. They didn't worry about the color of their arms. I wanted to be like them, but I was too afraid of the belt Mom kept in her drawer. Then I went to college. For the first time, I was away from the creams and the rules. I met Carlos. He was the first person who ever told me I was beautiful. Not beautiful for a dark girl, just beautiful. "Your skin is like honey," he told me one day while we walked in the park. I started to cry. I told him about the creams. I told him about the dark rooms. He held my hand and told me I never had to hide again. So I stopped using the chemicals. I let the sun touch my face. I grew to love the way I looked. I felt strong. I felt real. But I missed my sister Elena. She was still at home. She still looked pale and tired. I wanted to show her that it was okay to be ourselves. That is why I decided to go home for Thanksgiving. I brought Carlos with me. I thought that if they saw how happy I was, they would finally understand. I was so wrong. When we walked through the front door, the house was quiet. My mom didn't hug me. She didn't even look at Carlos. She just stared at my face. Her eyes went wide and her lips started to shake. "What did you do to yourself?" she whispered. Her voice sounded like a snake. "You look like a monster. You look dirty." "Mom, I'm happy," I said. My heart was beating so fast. "This is how I really look. This is me." Dad didn't say anything. He just pointed to the kitchen. "Go wash your face, Leia. Now." I tried to turn around to leave, but Dad was already behind me. He grabbed my arm. Carlos tried to step in, but Dad pushed him back. "This is a family matter." Dad yelled, "Get out of my house." Before I could scream for Carlos to help, they dragged me into the kitchen. My mom reached under the sink and pulled out a bottle with no label. It was a yellow liquid. "This will fix it," she said. Her face was calm, which was the scariest part. "It's a special mix. It will take the dark away forever." That's when the screaming started. As soon as the liquid touched my cheeks, I felt like someone had lit a match on my skin. I fell to my knees. I tried to pull away, but they were too strong. I could hear Elena crying in the hallway, but she didn't move. He just watched. "Help me," I screamed. "Elena, please." But Elena just stood there. She looked at me with eyes full of fear and something else. Was it hate, or was she just glad it wasn't her? The pain was so big it felt like the whole world was turning black. I could feel my skin tightening and peeling. I felt the cold water from the sink hitting my face, but it didn't help. The chemicals were eating me alive. Finally, I heard the front door crash open. It was Carlos. He had found a piece of wood from the yard and broke the lock. He saw me on the floor and he let out a sound like a hurt animal. He ran over and pushed my parents away. "What did you do?" he screamed. "What did you do to her?" He grabbed a wet towel and wrapped it around my face. He picked me up like I was a baby. My parents just stood there by the sink watching us. My mom still had the bottle in her hand. "She will thank me later," Mom said quietly. "She will be pretty again." Carlos didn't wait. He ran to the car. I remember the wind hitting my face and it felt like knives. I looked in the side mirror of the car as we drove away. My face didn't look like a face anymore. It was red and raw. I looked at the house shrinking in the distance. I saw Elena standing in the window. She didn't wave. He just watched me go. In the hospital, the lights were too bright. Everything hurt. A nurse came in and looked at my face. She gasped and covered her mouth. That was when I knew my life would never be the same. A woman in a suit came to see me later that night. She said her name was a social worker. She sat by my bed and held my hand. "Leia," she said softly. "This was not an accident. This was a crime. Do you want to tell me what happened?" I looked at Carlos. He was sitting in the chair by my bed. He hadn't slept. His eyes were red from crying. He nodded at me. "I'm scared," I whispered. My voice sounded thin and broken. I know, the woman said, but if you don't speak up, they might do this to Elena too. I thought about my sister. I thought about her pale, sad face. I thought about the way she stayed quiet while I screamed. I knew I had to do something, but my parents always told me that family secrets stay in the family. If I told the truth, I would lose them forever. I'll do it, I said. But as the police started asking questions, I realized that the fight was only beginning. My parents weren't going to go down easy. They started calling me. They told me I was a liar. And then the worst thing happened. Elena called me. Leah, why are you doing this? She asked. He was crying. Mom and Dad love us. You're going to put them in jail. Please tell the police it was an accident. Tell them you spilled it yourself. My own sister was choosing them over me. Even with my face covered in bandages, she wanted me to lie for the people who burned me. Hearing Elena's voice on the phone hurt more than the burns on my face. My own sister, the person I shared a bedroom with for 18 years, was calling me a liar. Leah, please, she cried into the phone. Mom is crying every day. Dad is so angry he's breaking things. They only did it because they love you. They wanted you to be pretty so you could have a good life. Why are you trying to destroy our family? They burned me, Elena. I shouted back. It hurt to shout. The skin on my cheeks felt like it was going to snap. Look at the photos I sent you. My skin is falling off. How is that love? You're being dramatic, Elena said. Her voice went cold. You always wanted attention. Mom says you probably rubbed your face on the stove just to get Carlos to feel sorry for you. If you don't drop the charges, you aren't my sister anymore. She hung up. I sat on the hospital bed and stared at the wall. My heart felt like a heavy stone in my chest. I realized then that my parents hadn't just burned my skin. They had crawled inside Elena's head and turned off the lights. She wasn't my sister right now. She was a puppet. The next few weeks were a blur of white rooms and pain. The doctors told me I had second-degree burns. They said I would have scars forever. Carlos stayed by my side every single second. He helped me eat when I couldn't move my mouth. He held my hand when the nurses had to change my bandages. One day the social worker Sarah came back. She had a serious look on her face. Leah, the police went to the house, she said. Your parents told them you were mentally ill. They showed the police old bottles of safe lotion and said you must have used something else on your own. They are making you look like the bad guy. But the bottle they used was right there. I said, it's gone, Sarah sighed. They cleaned the kitchen. They threw everything away. Without the bottle or a witness, it's your word against theirs. And right now your sister is backing them up. She told the police she didn't see anything. I felt sick. My own sister was helping them cover up a crime. I felt like I was drowning. If I didn't find proof, they would get away with it. They would keep hurting Elena, and they would never face the truth. I spent the next month living with Carlos in his small apartment. I was scared to go outside. I thought everyone was looking at my scars. I wore a mask even when it wasn't cold. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. My parents kept sending me messages. Come home and we will forgive you. Stop being selfish. You are nothing without us. I blocked their numbers, but the fear followed me into my dreams. I dreamt of the kitchen sink. I dreamt of the yellow liquid. Then one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't know. I picked it up thinking it was a telemarketer. Leah, a voice whispered. It was shaky and wet with tears. Elena. I sat up fast. What's wrong? I was wrong, she sobbed. I could hear things breaking in the background. I heard my father screaming in the distance. I found the bottles, Leah. Dad didn't throw them away. He hid them in the garage in a locked box. I found the key. Get out of there, Elena. Run. I stood up, waking Carlos. I tried, she whispered, but Dad caught me looking. He's losing his mind, Leah. He said if I'm going to be a traitor like you, I don't need to be pretty either. He's looking for the chemicals. I'm locked in the bathroom. Please help me. My blood ran cold. The brainwashing was finally cracking because the monster was finally turning on her. Elena had been the good daughter because she stayed pale and stayed quiet. But the moment she looked for the truth, she became a target. Stay on the phone with me, I said, my hands shaking. Carlos is calling the police right now. Don't open the door. Put towels under the door. He's hitting the door, Leah, she screamed. I heard a loud thud, then another. My father was trying to kick the door down. He's saying it's for my own good. He sounds just like Mom did on Thanksgiving. I felt a fire start in my chest. It wasn't the fire of the chemicals. It was the fire of a big sister who had had enough. I wasn't going to let her melt. I wasn't going to let them win. Listen to me, Elena, I said, my voice suddenly very calm. If he gets in, you run for the window. Don't look back. Just jump. It's the first floor. You can do it. I'm coming to get you. I heard the sound of wood splintering. Elena screamed a long, high scream that cut through the phone. Then the line went dead. I grabbed my coat and ran to the car with Carlos. He drove like a madman toward our childhood home. The house that was supposed to be safe. The house that was actually a prison. When we pulled onto the street, I saw blue and red lights flashing. The police were already there. 2 officers were dragging my father out of the front door. He was yelling about purity and family honor. My mother was sitting on the grass, covering her face and wailing like she was the victim. I jumped out of the car before it even stopped. I saw Elena standing by the porch. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Her face was okay, but her shirt was torn. She saw me and ran. She didn't look like the girl who called me a liar a week ago. She looked like a little girl who finally realized the monsters were real. She crashed into me, hugging me so tight I couldn't breathe. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my coat. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to be a good daughter." "I know," I said, stroking her hair. "But you're a person, Elena, not a doll." One of the police officers walked over to us. He was holding a clear plastic bag. Inside was the yellow bottle. The label was old and peeling, but I could see the words. It was a chemical used to clean industrial metal. It was never meant to touch human skin. "We found the evidence," the officer said, "and we found the receipts. Your father has been buying this stuff online for years. Your sister also gave us a notebook she found. It's your mother's. She wrote down every time she used it on you both since you were 5 years old." I looked at my mother on the grass. She looked back at me. Even now, with handcuffs on her husband, she didn't look sorry. "You ruined everything," she spat at me. "You're still dark, and now you're ugly too. I hope you're happy." I didn't cry. For the first time, her words didn't hurt. I looked at the scars on my arms and the bandages on my face. Then I looked at Elena, who was safe and standing in the light. "I am happy," I said, "because now you can never touch us again." But as the police took them away, I knew the hardest part was still coming. We had to go to court. We had to tell the whole world what happened in that kitchen. And I knew my parents had one last trick to play to keep themselves out of prison. The day of the trial felt like the longest day of my life. I stood in front of the mirror in a small room at the court. My face was mostly healed, but the scars were there. They looked like shiny pink clouds on my cheeks. For a long time I hated looking at them, but today they were my evidence. They were the proof that I was telling the truth. Elena was sitting on a bench next to me. She was shaking. She had spent the last few months living with me and Carlos. It wasn't easy. At night, she would wake up screaming because she thought Mom was coming into her room with the cream. She had spent so many years being told that her worth was in being pale. Now she didn't know who she was. "Are you ready?" I asked her. "I'm scared, Leia," she whispered. "What if the judge believes them? Mom looks so small today. She's wearing her church dress. She looks like a sweet lady. No one will believe she poured acid on you." "We have the bottle, Elena. And we have the notebook," I reminded her. We walked into the courtroom. The air was cold. My parents were sitting at a table with a man in a fancy suit. When my mom saw me, she didn't look mean like she did at the house. She wiped a fake tear from her eye and looked at the ground. She was acting. She wanted the judge to think she was just a sad mother who lost her kids. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the front. My heart was thumping so hard I thought it would pop. I looked at the judge. He looked kind but serious. "Tell us what happened on Thanksgiving," the lawyer said. I told them everything. I told them about the kitchen sink. I told them about the smell of the chemicals. I told them how my dad held me down while my mom fixed me. While I talked, my dad stared at me. He didn't look sad. He looked angry. He looked like he wanted to finish what he started. Then it was Elena's turn. This was the moment I was most afraid of. Elena had been brainwashed for so long. Would she stay strong? "Elena," the lawyer asked, "did you see your parents hurt Leia?" Elena looked at my parents. My mom mouthed the word please to her. It was a trap. My mom was trying to use love to make Elena lie. Elena was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at me. He saw my scars. He saw the girl who used to play dolls with her in the dark. "Yes," Elena said. Her voice was loud and clear. "I saw them. And it wasn't just that day. They have been hurting us since we were little kids. They made us stay awake all night so we would look pale. They hit us if we went in the sun. They told us we were dirty because our skin was dark." The room went silent. My mom let out a loud sob, but it sounded fake. Then something happened that no one expected. My mom's lawyer called her to the stand. We thought she would just lie more, but instead she started talking about her own childhood. "I did it for them," my mom cried out. "My grandmother did it to me. She used to scrub my skin with rocks until I bled. He said only white girls get to have a good life. I didn't want my daughters to be hurt by the world. I wanted them to be safe. I was just trying to protect them from the curse." I sat there frozen. I realized that my mom wasn't just a monster. He was a victim who became a monster. She had been hurt by her own family, and instead of stopping the pain, she passed it on to us. She really believed that our skin was a curse. She was so sick in her mind that she thought burning me was an act of love. But the judge didn't care about her excuses. He looked at the pictures of my burns. He looked at the notebook where she wrote down how much chemical she used on us. "Parents are supposed to be a shield," the judge said. His voice was like thunder. "But you were the sword. You used hate and fear to break your own children. This is not love. This is assault." I grabbed Elena's hand. We held our breath as the judge read the verdict. Guilty, he said. My father stood up and started yelling, but the officers grabbed him. My mother just sat there, shaking her head. They were sentenced to 3 years in prison. It wasn't a lifetime, but it was enough. It meant we were finally free. As they led my parents away in handcuffs, my mother stopped near me. For a second, the fake crying stopped. She looked at my face, at the scars she made. You'll see, she whispered. The world won't be as kind to you as I was. We walked out of that court into the bright, hot sun. For the first time in our lives, we didn't run for the shade. We stood right in the middle of the sidewalk and let the light hit our skin. What do we do now? Elena asked. She looked lost. We heal, I said, and we learn how to love ourselves. But healing was much harder than I thought. The marks on my face were starting to fade, but the marks in our minds were deep. Elena started to stop eating. She said if she couldn't be pale, she wanted to be thin so she could disappear. I realized that winning in court was only half the battle. We were free from our parents, but we weren't free from the voices they left in our heads. The years after the trial were not easy. Freedom didn't mean the pain just went away. Elena and I had to go to a special doctor for our minds, a therapist. In the beginning, Elena wouldn't eat. She wanted to be so thin that she could vanish. She still felt like being seen was a bad thing. I had to hold her while she cried, telling her over and over that she was allowed to exist. We had to unlearn every mean thing our parents ever told us. Slowly, the sun became our friend. I stopped wearing a mask. I started wearing bright colors, yellows and pinks that made my brown skin look warm and beautiful. I married Carlos in a small garden. When he looked at me, he didn't see scars. He saw the woman he loved. 2 years later, I had a daughter. I named her Maya. The first time I held her, I looked at her soft, dark skin. It was perfect. I promised her right then that she would never know the smell of those chemicals. She would grow up playing in the grass under the bright afternoon sun. She would never be told she was a curse. When Maya was 3, a letter came. It was from our mother. She had finished her time in prison and was living in a small apartment. She wanted to see us. Elena didn't want to go, but I did. I needed to see her one last time to know I wasn't afraid anymore. We met in a public park. There were lots of people around, which made me feel safe. Our mother looked old. Her hair was gray and her hands shook. When she saw Maya, she started to cry, but this time the tears felt real. She looks just like you did, Mom whispered. She reached out a hand but then pulled it back, like she knew she didn't have the right to touch my child. I am so sorry, Leia. I was taught to hate myself, so I taught you to hate yourselves. I see now that I was the one who was blind. You aren't cursed. You are beautiful. She told us about her own grandmother again, how she was beaten for being dark. She finally admitted that she had passed on a sickness that had been in our family for 100 years. We didn't hug her. We weren't ready to forgive everything, but we listened. And for the first time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The cycle was broken. It stopped with me. The biggest moment of change came last week. It was Elena's wedding day. I stood in the back of the room and watched her. She wasn't the scared girl hiding in the bathroom anymore. She was wearing a dress that showed her arms and her shoulders. She wasn't trying to look pale or sick to please anyone. She looked healthy. She looked proud. When it was time for her to walk down the aisle, she stopped and looked at me. She wasn't shaking. She stood tall. She didn't look like she wanted to disappear. She looked like she wanted the whole world to see her. She leaned in and whispered in my ear, "I'm not hiding anymore, Leia." I watched her walk toward her husband. I looked at my own hands, dark and strong. I looked at Maya, who was throwing flower petals and laughing in the light. We spent so many years trying to be small. We spent our childhoods trying to wash away who we were. But standing there, watching my sister smile, I realized we had finally won. We weren't victims anymore. We were women who were proud of our skin, our names, and our lives. That's when I realized we were never meant to fade away. We were meant to take up space exactly as we are. I looked at the kitchen sink in my own home later that night while I washed the dinner plates. I didn't feel afraid. I saw my reflection in the window. The scars on my cheeks were still there, but they didn't look like a tragedy anymore. They looked like medals. They were the marks of a girl who survived the dark so she could finally live in the light. For the first time, I felt truly free, not from my parents but from the fear of being myself.